happy to have you here today, Nick, and not only because of all that you've accomplished in your life, but because I've had you as a guest before, and one of the things that I just really appreciated was your willingness to share what it's really like to be creating, during this time or during any time, and some of the challenges you face. So thank you so much for coming on and doing this with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. There have been no complications during this last year. It's just been smooth as silk. So I'm happy to discuss.
Perfect. So to kind of just catch us up and to get our audience up a little bit, can you, I've already shared your bio, but can you just share, like, if someone asks you, hey, well, Nick, what do you do? Can you just share with them so that they understand a little bit more?
Well, I would say if somebody says, what do you do? I would say I'm a writer and executive producer for television shows. And I create TV shows and I run TV shows. I have been doing this I think I started in the business when I was in 1995. So I've been doing it for a long time. Right out of college, I started working on NYPD Blue. And I was working on that show for many years and ended up co-running that show with a close friend of mine and have done that ever since. So I would say in my heart of hearts, I'm a writer, but I also run television shows, which is a whole other skill set.
Great. And I'm going to help us pick us apart so we can understand that a little bit more. But first question, a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is around how we sometimes end up in our creative role or the creative job that we have. Did you always know that you wanted to be a TV writer? Like, did you go to NYU, like, that's what I'm going here to do? Or how did that happen for you?
I would say I always knew I wanted to be a writer, TV writer. I probably knew from a very young age. A close family friend was a well-known producer named Stephen Bochco, who was, very, very influential in my life and was my first boss at age 14. I was a production assistant for Steven, and he gave me a number of jobs as the years went on. And I started showing him my work when I was about 15 and 16 years old. And he would always say to me, when you get out of college, you're going to come work for me. And so he kind of recruited me at a very young age, which was an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. I always knew where it was going. He was incredibly encouraging to me. And as I got older, he would give me more exposure to writers' rooms. And so as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, I was sitting in writers' rooms, sort of a silent fly on the wall, watching TV get made. And then when I came out of school, he had NYPD Blue was on, and he gave me sort of an apprenticeship job. And I worked my way up. That was Awesome. How it started.
That's so awesome. And so I can see how you credit him with a lot of his mentorship. I even saw that. Yeah. And do you, at the time when you were, 16, 17-year-old, did you know how unique this opportunity was, or did it seem very natural?
That's a funny question. I didn't know anything. I knew nothing when I was 16 or 17. I didn't know which way was up when I was that age. I knew I didn't know what any of it meant. I really didn't. To answer your question, the answer is I didn't have a clue. I knew that what I wanted to do was write. I knew that I had something in me that compelled me to always be writing. It was no one told me to do this. No one suggested I do it. It was just something that I did always since the age of 14. And so when I got into the situation, I was incredibly intimidated. Everybody there, I was 23. Everybody else, when I got out of college, everybody there was 45. So I was working with, David Milch and people like that who were not the easiest boss and extraordinarily demanding and had a really high bar and was David Milch. And you were like, I worked to keep up with this insane pace and learned on the job. And I worked 7 days a week, and I just worked and worked and worked and worked. And I thought, I just got to get better. So I had no idea. I had no idea how to do it or what to do or wait. And I just sort of dove in and started flailing, and then eventually started swimming.
Got it. And I know I told you that we really like to stay in the present of the way we're talking, but I'm actually going to take you back to your story a little bit more because
Please, I'm sorry. It is.
I'm the one who making you go here because I really want to talk about this, because when you said, I just knew that I needed to be writing, that I really wanted to write. And a lot of times I think a lot of creative people be like, well, I'm good at this, and I'm also good at this, and I'm also good at this. And did you ever have that wrestle with yourself of, I really also like writing poetry, or I think I might want to write fiction. Did you ever,
Absolutely. I would say I started writing fiction and I still do write fiction. I love to write. It's a totally different muscle. I love to do it. It's to me like a totally separate thing in terms of the creative work that I'm doing. It really, the differences between the work that I do, it's like, and the work that I like to do, I guess sometimes, is that sometimes I like to do much more darker comedy material, which leaks its way into the work that I do all the time, but it's not necessarily the stuff that I'm, that I'm best known for in the industry, or that I'm easily sold for.
Right.
Which is something else we can talk about. It's like
Right.
how you are as a writer and who they sell you as, which is based on your previous work. But so tonally, I would say there are differences between the stuff that I do and the stuff that I like to do, and that I'm always, but it's ever evolving. But I would say, yeah, absolutely. Fiction is something that was I think the first thing I ever did was fiction. Then I started doing like plays, and I put on one play in my life. But yeah, so it's been TV for 25 years and I have no complaints. Like,
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. One of the things you said to me before that I think is helpful is also like what you just said around like almost like the way you're branded as a writer. Like, and you said, I've been at some of the major networks. And so when you could tell me if I'm going to get this wrong, Nick, so you correct me, that like when you're thinking about things like more of a cable network or an HBO, like that's not necessarily, you're not the go-to guy, or like there's a way that you're trying to change that narrative or that understanding. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
absolutely. I think that there is no question that if a job comes up in a streaming world, I'm not the first guy they think of. And even though it might be, it might be along the lines of the work that I've done, it's just, there's a sort of the way that people look at you, like you do network stuff, and you're very well suited to that and very well, employed in that realm. The thing that and I'll tell you how I've been sort of trying to get out of it is by developing outside of network television, is doing development projects that are specifically for streaming or specifically for cable. And by essentially building a new canon of work that I can show people and say, okay, look, this is not case of the week kind of network drama. This is its own, it's more of a, it has more of an anthology feel, whatever the vibe I'm going for. But you once you get pegged, you sort of have to kind of figure your way out of it. You have to nobody's going to say, oh, let's take a chance on the guy who only does network stuff.
I like what you're saying, Nick, because what you're saying is like, it's kind of evidence based. Like, so right now you're going to see my name and you're going to see me associated with all these network shows. And so now I have to show up with the evidence that actually I can do these other things, because you can see me pitching these other.
Absolutely. Work. I think that's the thing, that I've learned as time has gone on career-wise, is that you may think of yourself and you may love to write dark comedy, but until that dark comedy script is in front of people, doesn't matter what you think or what you feel or what you want. It's like, oh, I'd really love to go out for this. And people are like, well, there's no proof of concept on this.
Right.
So you have to, so even, regardless of where I think people are in their careers, if you want to go out and change course, you have to change the course and then get other people to believe that you can, that you can do the work.
Right. One of the things we say around here a lot is thinking about it is never going to teach you as much as doing it. And by doing it, someone's going to actually get to see if you're worth your medal and saying you want to do it. Like, you might even not like it by the time you get there. I have a question, because Nick, you seem like every time I've talked to you, you're incredibly generous and very calm, confident. That's how you come across. Do you ever get nervous at these pitches? Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Calm confidence in pitches? Is that?
Yeah. Do you ever get nervous? Like, do you ever get like, this is a big pitch, or do you always just feel kind of like it's either meant to happen or not to happen? Or how do you show up there, I guess? Because there's a lot on the line. I'm imagining there's a lot on the line, or do you not? How does it feel?
I never get nervous.
Really?
No, please. Are you kidding? It's insane. No, I think I get enormously. I would say it's gotten better over time. I would say I've pitched, I don't know how many things. I think I sort of took a count, and it was like, I think there's like 16 or 17 pilots that I've written. Wow. Which is, so take that and however many pitches that was, 4 or 5 for each, or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 for each. So it's been so many the thing that, and I get nervous, always get nervous. I always think I get this sort of I get stage fright. The thing that I do, but I have a very specific thing that I do to combat that is people say go into pitches and don't read your material. I read. I read everything. I'll go in there and I go in and and I don't know why people say that. I mean, like, and again, I have sold many, 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 many things, and I have read each one of those pitches was something I read. I would say there was like one thing off the top of my head that was so unformed that it was just so general that it didn't even sort of like go into the pitch area. But then ultimately I wrote the pitch document later anyway and sent it to them and they said, okay, fine. But it was like the pitch document to me, which is, it's like generally a 12 to 13 single spaced page document, to me is the script. I go in there and I read it and I perform it. And if I have it in front of me, and it really is, it's like a performance. And I think that just going in there and being like that is not going to work. But I really get into it and I feel enormously confident when it is in front of me. And if you ask me to do it on the 10th time without that document, I would collapse. I would be like, I need the document. So and generally the document, not to go on too long about the document, but the document is, if I'm working with other people, it has been gone, or with the studio or whatever, it's been gone over and gone over and gone over so many times that you go into these pitches. I always go into these pitches feeling essentially bulletproof. We're like, okay, either they're going to buy it or they're not, but they didn't buy it because it wasn't well pitched and it wasn't thorough. Mm-hmm. That's the thing to me, is like, are the questions answered? If the questions are answered, then, and I'm not like kind of going, oh, and then magic happens. It's like, as long as I feel like all the questions are answered, you are going to buy this project because it was there. And there's no question it was there. And if you don't want it, you don't want it. That's fine.
Yeah. I like the way you said that, because it sounds like, Nick, you found your way to be inside of a pitch. I'm sure you've been in other rooms where someone else is pitching and you're like, if this guy read the script, I would not want to have heard him to read the script.
There are people who are so good at who just rattle it off and go in there and tap dance with nothing in front of them. And I'm always in awe of that. And I'm like, at this point, 25 years in, I know who I am, and that's not me. And I just feel like I don't want to miss something. I don't want to be like, ooh, I forgot that. And I can craft it. I can make it so it flows, as opposed to me just like trying to tick boxes that are in my head. It's my way. There's people out there who just rip through these things like it was a conversation they were having over lunch. And I'm like,
I love that also, because it lets us get a little more human side of hearing how this goes for you, because one of the things I think a lot of the listeners here are actors, and going into a room, they're trying to bring themselves into the room, and we have different ways of preparing and different ways that goes for themselves. In your relationship with actors, right? So you're really writing your how does that look like for you in terms of actors? How close are you getting to actors in the work you do day to day when you're actually on a show? Or are you thinking about actors when you're writing? Like, how does that interact with your world?
I will say when I'm on a show, then, and I'm interacting with actors all the time. I mean, the questions, if I'm running the show, the questions are coming to me that are from set, and, it's my final say if I'm the showrunner of the show. So I'm interacting with them all the time. You're always saying, okay, hey, this is what's coming up next. This is what this is where this is coming from. This is where we'll end up with. So I'm always interacting with the actors. And then, but like right now, over the last year, where I haven't been in production at all since last, February, it was on a show, but I've been doing development since then. And it's been, I'll say the actor is always in your head. And I think it always needs to be in the writer's head for this kind of work. And by that, I mean, like, here was the experience. I'll tell you the experience that really nailed it for me in my life. Is we used to do, a lot of times nowadays they do, auditions are almost always on tape.
For real, look at 2021 as maybe the year where, and now they will never be.
There will never be a live audition for the rest of our lives. But like, the thing about live auditions, and this is when I was first, starting out, not that it was first starting out, for the first 10, 15 years of my career, it was like, you'd write the material, they would have the sides, you'd walk into where we were casting it, there would be 15 people in the hallway waiting to come in and read, and you would hear the scene, and generally you'd hear the scene for the first time up on its feet by somebody who was coming into audition. And you will, as a writer, I should say, have written in some word that in my head sounded so great, some 4-syllable monster that somebody had to, that made sense to me, that I pulled out of some whatever text. And you'll hear an actor say it and you're like, oh my God, that's terrible. It's terrible. And then what immediately flashed into my head the first time that this happened was, well, there's actually a director who looked back at me, who was sitting in front of me. He's like, did you write that? That's nice. That's a nice big word you got there. And I was like, because that there's 14 other people coming in who are going to stumble over exactly the same word. And you're just like, and it the second you hear it. You're like, oh, and you just want to go out in the hall and say, okay, everybody, scratch this word out. Just take it out of this script. I'm just going to give you all a little bit. So I think once you learn that, and that really just comes from hearing your work out loud. There's what's in your head and then there's what's out loud. And once you hear it out loud, you immediately go, oh my God. So there's always the actor in my head that is speaking these lines, that is trading these couplets, that is sort of like some thing in my head that says, okay, that's not going to play. Rewrite it now, or else you're going to hear it. And honestly, you hear it in tapes too, but like live, you're just staring at somebody who's looking back at you going, why would you do this to us? And you're like, you're just like, I'm so sorry.
Right. So when the actor, talking a little bit more about when you're a showrunner and you're on a show with actors, do you like having that part of the interaction? Is that something you look forward to? Is it just happenstance? Is it get a little more exciting to you? What is that like for you?
It's an interesting thing. It depends on who you're working with.
Yeah.
Some people use that interaction as, an opportunity to really just to clarify, and they just want to be like, okay, am I doing this? Am I doing this? And the questions are generally very easy and very like, hey, we're all in the moment together. Some people like to, everybody, it's your opportunity to interact with, somebody who's making you say a lot of stuff that sometimes you don't have a lot of power over. Mm-hmm. And it can be a very interesting kind of conversation where like
a weird struggle where an actor's saying my character wouldn't say this, those kind of
thing. And you're like, yes, I've invented your character saying exactly what your character would say. And they would say that. And it's like, but you can't say, it's not going to get people to an understanding of feeling heard and feeling like you just have to psychologically understand what's going on behind the note. Right. That's not actors. That's every single note I've ever taken. I never sit there and pay very close attention to the note. I look what is behind the note. Why are you saying this? Because sometimes the note isn't the word. It's 10 pages earlier or 10 pages later. So it's like, I have to be able to understand why that's coming up and be able to be like, okay, what are we really talking about? It keeps you on your toes. It makes you, I've never come out of those interactions not feeling truly exhilarated, where you're like, really? We're doing this in the moment and now they're going to shoot it and it's forever, people. And that to me is always kind of fun. Although I will say that sometimes you get that phone call of like, so-and-so wants to see you on set and you're like, And it's the long walk from your office to set where you're just like, because you're just going, what could it be? What could it be? What could it be? Is it this line? Is it this line? Is it this line? And I've never been right. I've never once have I been right. It's like you come down and it's like, I'm talking about tomorrow's work. You're like, tomorrow's work? What are we talking about? Oh, like you got.
You're always bringing the I've been called to the principal's office mentality, no matter what.
100%. Yeah. Honestly, it really depends on the actor. There's some, who are just like, they're gonna be absolutely. I've worked with amazing people who are only looking for clarity and looking for, and then you have great trust with. You trust them, they trust you. But that takes, time to build. But yeah, no, it can be.
Okay, I want to take it a little bit different direction. If that's as helpful for us, I think a lot of actors are hearing ways to both show up in the audition room and also ways to think about themselves on set and even having the chance to interact with the showrunner, having a chance to interact with the writer. And going to switch gears a little bit. In the 2021 that we see ahead of us, if you were to have your creative, everything you wanted to happen for yourself, what would that be?
I have a number of development projects that are going on right now. All of this material that I put together the over this last year, I'd love to see two of them happen. Like I'd love to see one of them happen, but I'd love to see, because one of them is a network thing and the other one is a streaming thing, very much a streaming thing. I'd love to see it happen. It would be awesome. I mean, I'd love to be able to thread that needle. I mean, I think getting back into production, really, ultimately, that's the goal. The goal is to get back into production on material that I originated or worked with others to originate. So I feel like that to me is my goal.
Mhm.
We'll see,
Yeah.
who knows? But I feel like I feel like it's certainly a possibility. There's enough material out there that I've put out there that has a possibility of a life. It's interesting, like none of it's dead. That's the only thing. It's like none of it's dead. It's all out there sort of percolating. It's just a matter of the most frustrating and the worst thing in the entirety of show business, which is waiting.
Right. Yeah. So if two things were happening, let's say both, let's live in the world of both are greenlit in your life, right? What does Nick's life look like day to day then if that's happening? Are you running around like a crazy person?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be, I mean, ultimately, I think that these two things would be on sort of different time frames, different time schedules. So it's sort of like, the thing that I always say is, you take it one day at a time and you do what's on your plate. Like what's there, don't try not to live. I mean, although we've obviously, so many of us, God only knows, we've all been living in the future for the last year, hoping for certainly a better one than in the present. But it's like, you just have to say, okay, what's here right now? Like I cannot control what comes tomorrow. All I know is what's in front of me. So just do what's in front of you and worry about the rest of the stuff later. Yeah. It's busier. I mean, if one goes, it's suddenly, it's a full-time job plus 5. And then if 2 goes, it's 2 full-time jobs plus 10. It's like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but I think they're different. They would go at a different pace. Yeah. One would shoot overseas. One would be all written at once. The other one would, who knows? I don't know how network is working these days. Like, yeah. I don't know what they're doing. They're working more on a streaming model anyway, in terms of like generating scripts and then shooting. So who knows?
Yeah. And in your world of what you like better, are you someone who likes, have you always been on set when you're shooting? Are you someone who's in a room and not going to set? Has that ever been a part of your life? Am I sounding like a real naive person who's asking a question?
No. I think there's people who, I mean, I go where I'm needed. I'm not going to sit on set. I will sit on set every day for the pilot. If I'm shooting a pilot, I'm there every day for every shot, for every take. I got to see everything, because then I know what's there. And when I get into the cutting room to do my pass on it, I know what's there. I know what's been printed. I know what wasn't printed. I know what we can take. I know what we can futz, day-to-day series stuff. I feel like the writer of the material there is there. If it's mine, somebody else should be covering it, and I should be rewriting material in the cutting room or in the writer's room. But again, that's a network model, because for streaming, the scripts are already written, so you're not worrying too much about that. I would certainly, it's more chunked out. You do all the scripts, you do all the shooting, you do all the cutting. So I feel like it's a different thing. I do feel like the more I'm on set, like for the pilot, I've always felt it's just absolutely essential. You just gotta know, and you gotta be able to craft it, and you're always going to have notes. But unless you can maintain that consistency, I think just sort of dropping in with ideas is sort of, unless you're called there, I feel like you have to let set sort of live its life. Mm-hmm. And, you always have eyes and ears there. You always have a writer there who's going to sort of be like, you may want to come down for this. And then you do. But I feel like then there are some people that just they like to hide on set. They like to sort of not be in the writer's room and just go sit on set, because it's already done. The script is done. It should be pretty smooth. And if it's not pretty smooth, then, you have some issues there, but most of the time it's pretty smooth. Mm-hmm. So I feel like some people go down there just to sort of get away from actually sitting there.
So something you just said, and I want to make sure we really catch this because I feel like this might be a little inside baseball for us. So, and I love what you said about streaming is like they're written already, like almost the way a film is written. Like if there's no white writers room at that point, the whole thing's written, they're shooting, and that's the way it's going. So when you're writing for streaming versus network, are you really thinking about stories differently?
I think in network, you're thinking about it almost, I mean, you're thinking about the closed-ended nature of it. I think with streaming stuff, you're thinking about the open-ended nature of it. How can this lead and how can we sort of get a complete emotional story told here, but then really open it up so it throws into the next episode as well. Like it's just a totally different kind of.
What's a show that you would point to as a streaming television show that you think is really doing this well?
Stranger Things does it perfectly. It's interesting. Like I'm trying to think of what I've been watching that sort of does this extreme. Like I would say, I always go back to Stranger Things because I feel like it's almost the absolute paradigm of what it has. Like it's charming, it's serious, it's got a big budget, it's got an enormous amount of emotion in it, and an enormous amount of story in it. Like it is simply hooked me. And it's not really my genre. I'm not a sci-fi. I don't really, I'm not so sci-fi, but also, it has this enormous emotional grounding to it. And then also Game of Thrones. I don't think you can sort of look at Game of Thrones as not being anything but like a, perfectly rendered cable television show. Like, I mean, I know you can take issue with a lot of things in it. You can take an issue with the ending, you can take an issue with a lot of stuff. But in terms of the sort of overall storytelling, I thought it was I think it was like, you were hooked and they every episode had a cliffhanger. I mean, every episode was like,
what's going to happen? Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also, you picked two sci-fi shows here, so I don't know, Nick.
I know. I think Game of Thrones sci-fi, I would say, but I just think the cliffhanger nature of those shows, it's just how they're watched and how, it's also how they're aired. Like Netflix doesn't want you to watch a show a week. They, if you talk to anybody at Netflix, they're like, we want you to watch it within, I think, 6 days.
Wow.
Like they have something where it's like, eat it up. Don't wait. If this sort of like whatever their matrices are, which are just insane how much data they collect, is it's a very, very short period of time. They really don't want people waiting on their material. They want them to rip.
So as a creator, does that make you think about how you would want to write that material different? Like, oh, somebody might watch this quickly as opposed to watching one episode a week, which I think most people are not necessarily doing that now. But do you?
Yeah,
does it change the way?
I think you have to think of it in terms of a much longer piece. I would say more like a book than or a longer movie. It's then like your traditional network television show, which is not what anybody's really working on anymore. But I guess they are. But it's like that kind of thing is like it's got to have a cliffhanger. You've got to be absolutely, the last 5-10 minutes of it has to be episode 2. It's like, it's all about episode 2, episode 3. Get me to the next one, rip me out of this one and throw me into that one. And that is, I think that's the difference in the thinking is like, this isn't really about, this episode is fine. It's about the next one. How do we get you to the next one? Different story break, different thought process. To a degree. It's not like 1,000% different. It's not like the whole wheel is reinvented, but it is about get it to the next episode.
Yeah. It's interesting the way when you just talked about that, I started to think about the way that I watch TV differently even. And so you're almost back ending into each episode. What are we doing next? What are we doing next?
Because I want another. I just want another. And it's funny, like even, and I really do think it has an enormous amount to do with just sort of concentrating so much on the emotional content of what's going on. What is the thing that's really hooking you? And the thing that is really hooking in so many ways in these shows is this big heart. Like you even look at The Crown. Like The Crown is not a traditional streaming show. It's very episodic. And it really is closed-ended. And you can jump in kind of anywhere.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, I whipped through 3 crowns at night. You're like,
Yeah.
I gotta know.
You're invested in the people more than the story, weirdly.
Yes, I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
so.
The relationship, or yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Also, we all know the story, some of it. So like, there's also that piece
Yeah.
of,
You
right,
kind of know. You
right,
kind of know where this is going.
right. And is there anything as you look back on what you've accomplished so far where you said, like, I wish I'd known this before?
All of it. I wish I knew all of it before. I wish I knew everything before. I'm like, what? I'm trying to think of what a specific would be for that. You know, I don't sit there and look back and say, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. Every decision I think creatively that I made was made for, I made a lot of decisions. I can look back on and say, you know, I was actually offered that job and that show's becoming enormously successful, but I took this one, but I couldn't do that one because I couldn't do that kind of traveling for my family. I just couldn't, like, one was shooting in LA, one was shooting way overseas. And it's like, yes, the overseas one became what it became, but if you gave me the decision again today, I would have made the same decision. I don't think I think that it's funny. I don't think I sit there and go, I have a bunch of regrets. All I really do is I say, okay, what's coming next? I really don't. I really feel like there are so many things that I've been taught. I mean, I've had miserable experiences in some jobs that taught me and more than the wonderful experiences did. Yeah. And I wouldn't trade those miserable experiences for anything.
What's one thing you learned from a miserable experience? You don't have to name any names here.
I don't know, I'm not going to tell you. But I would say the show that I was working on was not the show for me. And it was just a completely different kind of thing that I normally do. But it taught me something about pacing that I did not know, that I was not aware of. The shows that I'd worked on previously had been much more about 3-page scenes, 3.5-page scenes, really sort of chewing that up. Whereas this show that I ended up working on was like 1.5 pages, bam, 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 just go, 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 go. And I took that away into everything that I did afterwards. Was like, this is like the show I was working on was an amazing show, but then this new thing was like, it was much more modern show. And it was like, this is like 3-page scenes. I mean, never. If I wrote a 3-page scene, I'd be like, what?
So it was kind of beat into you is what it sounds like.
It was, and I learned it, and I guess I just sort of learned it the hard way, but it was, it was a culturally very strange place, but it was, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot. And I would say that there's not a single experience that I've had that didn't teach me something.
That's awesome. When you think about yourself as a writer, you seem like someone who's very like, I put my butt in the seat and I write. Is that about what it is? Is it easy for you to shut that door and go in that room and do that? Or do you have to wrestle like, let me make the bed and does anybody else need anything from me today? Kids, wife, anybody? Like,
I think I put my butt in the seat and I see what's on the computer. I don't know if I'm that good. I will say this, when it comes to a deadline, I am enormously respectful. Like I need that deadline to drive me, and I will hit that deadline and usually beat it. And when it's like, when I'm in it, I'm in it. I think what I've also learned is that the process of typing is one part of writing. Typing is one part. And there is a lot of what seems to be rolling around in the ground, whining, that goes in front of it. And then there's another experience that goes on after it. And that right in the middle is the typing and the scripting. But that part before where you're just like, I don't want to. And I just looked at it and it just made my eyes hurt. And that's part of writing too. I think that it's what a friend of mine would call the rolling around on the ground in your underwear stage of writing, where you're just like, you're just a baby and you don't want to do it. But there's something about, because when I write, and I think when real writers write, you become this other thing. You become this machine that cannot stop, that cannot be stopped, that has to finish. And it is enormously uncomfortable. And because it's all you're thinking about, you're just in it. And it is an amount of concentration that can make you feel sick. Like you can feel at the end of the day that this is all I did was write. And now I'm just like, oh, I just feel gross. You know it's coming. So it's not an easy thing to sort of transform yourself into. But so I will, when I'm in it, yes, I will the second that I wake up, this is all I'm thinking about. I will wake up in the middle of the night with notes, but then I will fall out of that and sort of, not do that for a little while. And with the understanding that I know I'm going to get back into it pretty soon. So just try to enjoy the time.
It's the way you describe it is like the Jekyll and Hyde, like it's going to come over you and you're going to have no idea when it's going to come over you. And it's going to,
when it's going to come over you. It's going to come over you when you start to feel the heat. And when somebody says, hey, how's the script coming? And you're like, oh, still 2 pages long. And you're like, okay, now I've got to actually grow up and do it.
One of the things you said about having an outside deadline is something we talk about a lot here, because a lot of people are more geared toward, if there's someone else that I have to be accountable to, I will get this done. If it's just to me, like, see me in a year and a half and I might have written 3 pages on it. Do you ever fabricate deadlines, and does that work, or does it actually have to be attached to someone else?
I will fabricate deadlines just to sort of do it. I generally will end up cheating on them pretty well. If there's somebody else out there who calls me up and says, hey, how's it going? The guilt. Guilt is great. It's such an enormous motivator. Which I think in the work that I do, like on shows, you're like, I don't want anybody calling me up and saying Wootton is slow. Like that, I can't have that. But when I'm doing it like for my own, like there's this pilot that I'm doing right now for Apple, which I'm working with a producer, and I need him to call me. And I like, whenever he calls me, I want to throw the phone against the wall because I'm like, why is he bothering me? But then I'm like, I need him to call me. I need him to do it. And I'm very grateful that he does it. But it's, I feel like it's very helpful. Accountability. I mean, accountability in creative work is enormously helpful. It's just.
When you're in that Jekyll and Hyde mode, are you kind of a dick, or are you a nice person still?
I try to be a nice person. I could be, it's just, you just are, this is all that I'm thinking about. And now you're asking me what? I don't know. It's just, you have to understand that and I think that as time has gone on, I've sort of become to understand that this is really a state of mind that you go into, and that life is still going on around you, and you need to kind of be able to click it off and be like, okay, other people have questions too. It's much more in, like, I would say, development mode, because in the show you really have to be able to switch. You have to change hats very, 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 very quickly. But no, when I'm sitting here in my office for the last year under quarantine writing stuff, like somebody's bugging me.
Dangerous.
And but my wife's a writer too, so everybody's walking on eggshells sometimes.
Okay, got it.
No big deal.
So as we're coming towards the end here, I just wanted to ask you, if you were talking to a young writer, young creator right now, is there something you would just want them to hear that you think is vital for them to know?
I think you have to just simply keep writing a lot. Write a lot. Like, it's one of those things that you tell people and you're like, I think they already know it. Like, you have to keep writing constantly. You have to have, I feel like you have to have multiple projects going at once. It has to become sort of this, you're not necessarily, it's not like you're the gift of being a writer. You're being possessed. It's like what you are in your core. And if you are not that, that's who you're up against. Like, that's who's doing this. Like, I am possessed. I have 4 projects. I've been possessed by this since I was 14 years old. And if you are not doing what I'm doing, you're up against me. And I'm like and it's like, not like I'm sitting here after to knock people off, but like, I produce a lot of material. I put out a lot of material. And I think that if you become as a young writer, like, here is this thing that I'm enormously proud of, that is enormously, that I feel is so precious to me. I'm now going to sort of launch it into the world. The problem is that's the end of your ability to have control over its existence. Like, now it's in the agent's hand, or it's in your friend's hand, or it's in some producer's assistant's hand who's going to give it to the producer if they like it in 6 weeks maybe. And now you're just like, I personally am just like a ball of anxiety. Like, where is it? Why isn't it happening? Why isn't it like, you don't know how hard I worked on this. So if I can channel that energy into another project, that's probably the best thing for me to be doing, or else I'm just going to be like, and I do it now. I mean, I do it now with things that I've finished, and I'm like, why isn't it? It's like, shouldn't you be writing your Apple project? And I'm like, yes, but I should also be wondering where this feature script is and why didn't it go to so. The more I think you can sort of back up with overlapping projects, the better. And that's, again, I think that's something that some people need to be told, but a lot of people just don't. They're just doing it anyway. But patience. The other thing is patience. That ultimately it's out of your hands once it gets into other people's hands, and you have to be patient. And my best way of being patient is by being active.
Right. I mean, wait, you said writing is my survival skill when I'm otherwise be anxious on what's going to happen with my next project.
I just have no control. The only thing I have control over is what goes on the blank page. Past that, I really don't. So I have to sort of, and I can annoy people. I annoy people all the time. I'm like, no.
What do you mean when you say that? What do you mean you'll nudge them?
Okay,
what's going on?
What's going on? And I just call it agitating, and I'll just go agitate other people because I'm going to push out a bunch of texts or emails just so those emails and texts come back, because I know the answer. 99% of the time I know the answer. And I just want...
Which is what? We still don't know yet?
We still don't know yet. He hasn't answered. He hasn't read it yet. We're waiting for word. Nobody knows. That's generally the answer. Like, because if they know, nobody's sitting on information. And they're certainly not sitting on good news. Nobody's ever sitting on good news. Bad news, they may sit on. Good news, they'll never sit on. Like, because everybody wants to be a hero. So, like, but generally you know the answer. So... but I call it agitate because it's basically like throwing out sonar just to get the ping back. You're like, okay, am I still in the world? Okay, good. Now back to what I was supposed to be doing.
Right. Well, also, like, it's kind of like a salve to your own anxiety. At least I got a little bit of it. Like, someone said, I'm not the only one who's thinking about this, or whatever.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
So to kind of round things out here, I wanted to ask you, in the way you describe yourself, do you think of yourself as a writer now? Have you earned it?
Yes, I do. I think I don't, it's like I've always thought of myself as a writer. I feel like as a perfectly skilled, crafter of A, B, or C, who knows? But I would say as a writer, yes. The thing I think that delineates writers from non-writers is, do you feel like you are worthless if you didn't write? If you don't write and you feel like, oh my God, I have not fulfilled my purpose on this earth, you're a writer. That is how I feel. I feel like if I go through a certain amount of time, which is a very short amount of time, 1 day, 2 days, without having written something, I have failed. And I think that every writer that I know that is a professional writer who does this out of their sort of, gut, feels exactly the same way. Without anybody communicating, that's how you're supposed to feel. It's like you just are simply possessed. Like I was saying, it's the thing that it's this curse. And you're like, and I hate to put it in this negative way, but God, sometimes it really is. Sometimes you're just like, I wish I just was like, I wasn't up at 4 a.m. thinking about the act 3 out for this thing and why it's so weak and why
can't I just work at Einstein's Bagels once in a while? Why can't I just think
And you're like, okay, and you realize that's, I'm extraordinarily blessed and very grateful for what I've been doing for many, many years. But it'll, it's a lot of mind work, and mind work can bring you to your knees.
Yeah.
You're like, oh God. But
yeah.
It's
I think that's really, Nick, I just want to appreciate you for saying that, because so much of the listeners to this podcast, we talk about how, like, this is it. This is your purpose. So you can either accept it or not. You're going to be miserable if you try to fight up against it. I always say, like, they're going to be, if you try to, like, move away from your purpose, your new neighbors are going to be really loud, because they're just going to keep saying, you really need to move back to where you used to live. You need to be an actor. You need to be a writer. You need to do that.
And it's like, and ultimately, I think also you have to realize, look, this is the best job in the world. If it's what you want to do and it's who you are, it's the best job in the world, but it's still a job. It's still a hard job where a lot of people are going to give you notes, where they're not going to like what you want. They're going to sort of dismiss your greatest creative achievement as, I don't know, it's a little slow. And you're like, you know, and it's like, my God, how what? But it's still the greatest job in the world. And you have to understand that, you know, as Ray Charles said, you know, they don't pay me to make music. They pay me to live in hotels. And it's the same with writing. I think they don't pay me to write. I'll write anywhere on anything. It's like, but they pay me to take notes, and they pay me to deal with the waiting, and they pay me to deal with all this other stuff. Writing, I do for free. Everything else is, you know, that's where the professional side comes in.
That's beautiful. I think we should leave it there. That is so great, Nick. Thank you so much for making this time for us. It is always really nice to talk to you. I just love connecting with you in the way. So thanks for making the time for us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I have all the best with this. Tell me when it goes up.